Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, it's an extremely exciting breaking news edition. We haven't got to do one of these in a little while. Good to be back on the breaking news sports excitement train.
Certainly not the first, not the last. It is going to be an exciting offseason in the Ohio State world. The reason we are coming to you today with this immediate instant reaction emergency podcast is that Will Howard, Kansas State quarterback, has announced that he is transferring to Ohio State to compete, Tom, to be the Ohio State starting quarterback next year. Will Howard, I believe, 23 career starts to his belt, which is many more than the existing Ohio State quarterback roster of, let me count that, this is 7, 4, 8, 1 career starts currently for the Ohio State quarterbacks. And that includes true freshman Aaron Noland when he arrives this month.
Yeah, this is a really unique situation for Ohio State because I think for the last month, we had obviously heard a bunch about Will Howard over the last few weeks, just like we've been hearing about Cam Ward for a week or two before that. And I always kind of wondered if they were going to be able to sort of split the baby on this one, where you have to be able to either bring in someone who is so much clearly better than the talent you have on hand, and I don't think that's necessarily the case here, or you'd have to be willing to, would they have to guarantee someone the job to bring them in? And if you do, does that chase everyone else out of the room? You don't want to do that. This is a case where you're bringing him in to, as you said, compete for the job. Competing for the Ohio State job is obviously a pretty good opportunity if you spent your last few years at Kansas State, which is a heck of a football program, just won the Big 12 last year, but is not Ohio State level. To be able to bring him in, we're assuming that everyone else is going to stay and is not going to, Devin Brown had the burn the boats thing, so you would assume he does not have a boat at this point. So you would assume that he's presumably, at least planning to stay for now. If you can keep all four of the quarterbacks, Will Howard, Devin Brown, Lincoln Kienholz, Aaron Noland, and have them all in for spring, that's a win. I don't know how much this makes me think, oh boy, the ceiling for this Ohio State team is so much higher now. This feels like a raise the floor kind of moment where, you know what you have more or less with Will Howard. This is not Justin Fields coming in, and that's okay. You don't necessarily need a Justin Fields, and if you could get one, I'm sure they would love to get one. Justin Fields is not in the portal this year. This is someone you're bringing in to, I think, at least raise the floor of your 2024 season to sort of around where the quarterback play was in 2023. And that's probably, if that's your floor, then you kind of go from there and maybe you end up with much better than that.
Yeah. Will Howard this year, 2,643 yards passing in 12 games, 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, which is very similar to Kyle McCord, more interceptions, but Will Howard obviously not throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. And maybe that's one of the reasons he is looking to transfer for his final season is, from my understanding, what I was told is that Kansas State didn't guarantee him a starting spot next year, that he would have to compete with freshman Avery Johnson, who they like, and Johnson played some here and there this season. And so they were, the interesting thing about college football now is you can't guarantee the veteran that has not been perfect. Like CJ Stroud, you can guarantee. Lower than that, can't guarantee Kyle McCord, can't guarantee Will Howard that they will start, because you also don't want to lose the talented people behind them. And also, neither one of those guys have played so well that you're like, come on. You can't look at Devin Brown and be like, dude, come on. You can't look at Avery Johnson and be like, hey, Will Howard is playing so well right now. You just have no hope of playing, when Avery Johnson is seeing 10 interceptions being thrown. And so that's the way the game is now, where you almost have to side with the younger guy It's very video game-like as well. When I think we've all done these seasons or franchises, dynasties, whatever, where you side with Terrell Pryor over a fifth-year Todd Beckman type of thing, and you move on, and that's what a lot of people are doing. Will Howard choosing Ohio State, sure, I have to compete for the job, but if I win it, I'm going to be throwing to better receivers than I've ever had. So I could really show that this could be, I have it. And you get to show only so much of what you can do, I guess, at a Kansas State or a place where you don't have the receivers that Ohio State does, or that an Alabama or something like that, or USC, and USC in particular, where it wasn't that long ago, it seemed like he was committed to USC, or there were reports that he was committed to USC. And I want to go throw to Zachariah Branch. Who doesn't? That didn't work out, and so now at Ohio State could be throwing to a number of very talented prospects. And even if he doesn't know all of the names, I'm sure when he gets to Ohio State, he'll be like, oh wow. And like when Jim Knowles arrived at Ohio State and sees the guys running around that he's going to get to coach after coming from Oklahoma State, you're like, this could be pretty fun. And for a Will Howard, not just the receivers, but also Ryan Day.
Yeah, you look at someone with Ryan Day's track record of developing quarterbacks for the NFL. I don't know that Will Howard is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. I'm not expecting that. But, I think Ryan Day has the opportunity to make Will Howard the best Will Howard that he can be for the NFL. And whatever that is, Ryan Day has a better track record with developing quarterbacks than Kansas State does. And I have seen the idea expressed that how good can this guy be if he if he's not being guaranteed the starting position or isn't going to be the starter for next year for Kansas State. Dylan Gabriel left Oklahoma for largely the same reason, because they have talented young quarterbacks and they couldn't guarantee him the starting job for next year. And a whole lot of people want them to bring in Dylan Gabriel. So it's the same situation. It's literally the same situation. So we'll see what Will Howard looks like in the Ohio State offense. I'm kind of intrigued as to what this means for the Ohio State offense for 2024, because now you've got Will Howard, you've got Devin Brown, you've got Lincoln Keenholz, you got Aaron Noland. All of those guys are fairly mobile. Not, we're not talking about Michael Vick here with any of them, but you've got guys who are a little more mobile. It is not you've gone through 3 years in a row of Kyle McCord and a couple of years of CJ Stroud where everyone's kicking and screaming that they're not running the quarterback enough. Now you have, basically a whole roster of guys who all sort of fit the same mold, where it certainly feels like you're going to see a little bit of a different look to the Ohio State offense next year. That's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. The other piece of this is, if you're not the starting quarterback, we have seen Ohio State quarterbacks who run, you do not necessarily play every snap of every game. You see guys get banged up all the time. Devin Brown could not stay healthy even in limited snaps last year. Hopefully that's not something that is a recurring issue for him, but he played. They put him in for a package against Purdue, had a couple series there, put him in against Penn State. Boom, he gets hurt and misses basically the rest of the regular season. Put him in as a starter for the Cotton Bowl, gets hurt in the first quarter, and then boom, you miss the rest of the game. You are going to run through a quarterback or two when you have a quarterback who is kind of a big piece of the run game for you, and or if you have an offensive line that's not super fantastic. So, depth at that position, Ryan Day talks about wanting 4 scholarship guys there. He has, at least for the moment, he has 4 scholarship guys there.
Will Howard runs fairly well, pretty well for a 6'5", 245-pound guy. Rushed for 351 yards this season. I have to go back and adjust for sacks, and I'm sure it's probably closer to 500. But has 2 100-yard rushing days in his career, both against Oklahoma State, including one this year. But the fact that both came against Oklahoma State, Tom, does that mean he's going to look really good in practice against Jim Knowles' defenses when he's scrambling around and making plays and pulling some reads? But he had this season 4 games of 46 yards rushing or more. last year, 351 yards rushing this year. And then he was injured for half a year, and that impacted his running because he had 35 carries for 22 yards all season long last year. You go back to the COVID years, he started, I think, 6 or 7 games as a true freshman in 2020, rushed for 360 yards in that season, including a career high 125 yards against Oklahoma State, 79 yards against Texas, and a 69-31 loss to end the season as a true freshman. I'm looking forward to going and watching much more of him because really when this whole Will Howard thing started happening and there was talk about it, to me, I'm with you exactly what you said. I don't know that this raises the ceiling because I think the ceiling could be pretty high with anybody in Ohio State's room, but it certainly raises the floor. And if he doesn't win the job, you may have the best backup quarterback in America, which is not a bad thing. You certainly need to raise the level of competition, just as Jim Knowles talked about Davison Igbinosun. They brought him in. He made everybody better. You bring in a quarterback, really, it could be any a starting quarterback into a room can either be like bouillon and make everything taste better. It's that sort of thing. You bring in some seasoning, a seasoned vet, if you will, Tom. And whether or not he wins the job, everybody else is going to have to raise their game because they're no longer, Devin Brown is no longer just competing with Lincoln Kienholz, and Lincoln Kienholz no longer just competing with Devin Brown. So for that reason, they're all going to have to get better. And it's not the most elite room in America that, Ryan Day wants, but this is also, based on what we saw in the Cotton Bowl, I think there's some concern there.
Yeah, I think for sure there's some concern there. And with Devin Brown, they've supposedly seen it in practice and showed it sort of on and off during fall camp. You haven't really seen it during games yet, and some of that is just a sample size issue with, I wonder how different the quarterback race would look going into 2024 if Devin Brown had come out in the Cotton Bowl and thrown for 280 yards and a couple touchdowns, and they win that game. Even if they win that game 20-14 or something like that, boy, the conversation around the quarterback position probably looks a lot different than it did after that. After 14-3 happened, you haven't gotten to see it from Devin Brown, and he's had some opportunities. The start of the game looked a little rough. Was that just nerves, or was that this is what he is? There's no way to know right now because he didn't get a chance to work through the nerves. So that just makes it a really uncertain thing. And Lincoln Kienholz, everyone talked after the game about how unfair it was for him to sort of get thrown into that position. His first meaningful snap as a college quarterback comes backed up to his own 5-yard line against a New Year's 6 Power 5 SEC defense on national TV in the Cotton Bowl as a true freshman who wasn't in for the spring and played his high school football in South Dakota. Like, that is about as unprepared as you could possibly be for your first time going out there. Heck, the first time we talked to him in an interview setting as a college player was at the post-game podium for the Cotton Bowl. That's a pretty good indication of just like, boy, this is, you have not had the usual ramp-up process here. It's just like, well, we'll throw you in the deep end of the pool and see if you can swim. I think he's going to look very different in 2024 once he's had a year to go through the offseason conditioning and go through spring practice and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if he's going to be physically ready to start in 2024, to be like the day one starter in 2024. I think he's going to be far more prepared, but that's a pretty steep learning curve. And sometimes it takes till a third year to get a guy in there. Kyle McCord sat for 2 years. He did not, and he was in for 2 springs, and he was in, got to sort of have a little bit more of a traditional ramp up. He did start one game against Akron in 2021, but that was a very different thing. Devin Brown is entering his 3rd year and had just now started his first game at the end of his 2nd year. So, I don't know that I'm necessarily assuming Lincoln Kienholz is going to be 100% ready to take the reins. So this then gives you, Aaron Nolan coming in as a true freshman is not going to be ready to take the reins day one. So this gives you a second, this guy will definitely have the seasoning, Tony. to be a potential starter for you day one in the 2024 season.
And another thing to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about Will Howard a bunch over the coming months and obviously the rest of the year. Injuries have been a part of his career as well. I'm not sure he's ever gone through an entire season without being injured. And I know we've seen it's been a small sample size for Devin Brown, but he's now had 3 injuries that have kept him out of games, if you include the spring game with the broken finger or whatever. And then, of course, getting the ankle rolled up against Purdue and missing time in there, and then the Cotton Bowl. You've got 2 quarterbacks who have an injury history. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they can maintain that health or if there are going to be continued issues. So just something else to keep in mind there as well. Tom, you got anything else before we head out?
No, I think that covers it. And like you said, we're going to probably do quite a bit more on Will Howard, maybe try and do some deep dives on watching some games and give you a better sense for exactly what he could bring to the Ohio State offense, because it's a little different than what we've seen from the Ohio State offense the last couple seasons. So should be a lot of interesting stuff to learn watching more than just sort of extended highlight reels, because you watch the highlights and it's like, boy, this guy never makes any mistakes. And, he's done a lot of great things in his career, but I'm sure, Tony, at some point he's thrown an incomplete pass.
Yeah, and I've not watched enough Kansas State football at this point in terms of this season to have a super accurate judgment, other than the fact that most Kansas State quarterbacks are not NFL quarterbacks. So that's what I'm basing my opinion on. And you look at the stats and they are what they are. But I'm looking forward to getting a deeper dive and looking at everything, honestly, for this and seeing how it applies to Ohio State. And also, yeah, he runs the ball, but that doesn't mean Ryan Day is going to run him. So that's another factor in there to see how aggressive Ryan Day is with the running quarterback, or running the quarterback, not a running quarterback. But that will do it from here. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please hit the thumbs up on this video. We would appreciate it. And of course, you can always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we will definitely be talking about this on the premium Huddle message board. You can find us there as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.